Hey Tim, how are you?
Jeff, if things got brighter, I'd have to wear shades. I'm just wonderful. Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me on Indispensable Appraisers podcast. Cool.
Well, I'm going to tell my wife you said I was indispensable. Thank you very
Did
much.
I say that? You're
No,
always right.
no,
You're
I'm going to
always
tell her
right.
that anyway. I'm going to tell her that anyhow, so don't worry about it.
Okay, I'll talk to her later.
Okay.
All right, first question out of the gate, Tim. Where in the valuation space in our industry, what are we doing good? What are we winning at?
Okay. Appraisers, as far as I can tell, are a group of hard-working folks. They want to do well, and I don't mean monetarily. Well, yeah, I do, but they want to bring service to their clients. They want to bring unbiased, objective service to their clients. They want to bring it in on time and under budget, which is really about all you can ask for. Appraisers generally are the kind of folks who will, help somebody out. I meet with appraisers all over the country, and almost without exception, you're dealing with fine, exemplary human beings, and it's great to be able to associate with people like that. Appraisers are coming out of their shells, as it were. They're trying to, we have been accused of being an industry of old white men, and I say that as an old white man. But we're coming out of that. The diversity initiative that so many groups are working hard to promote, I think is a plus. And within the limitations of qualifying education, et cetera, let's get more people in the business. They need to be qualified. They need to be properly trained. They need to be properly educated. But there's no reason to exclude somebody from the business. Let them exclude themselves. Let's make this available to everybody. Again, within the context of proper education, proper training, proper experience. So I think appraisers are doing very well at that. And I think that uh, given some of the new leadership in the industry, that is going to continue. Are there some negative parts? Of course there are. There are negative parts of being a lawyer. There are negative parts of being a doctor. Um, CPAs are dropping like flies. But from our standpoint, yeah, there's a there's a there is an initiative. Everybody is trying to do their best, if not better. Everybody's trying to serve their clients. So that's the kind of people, that's why I enjoy being an appraiser. That's why I enjoy associating with appraisers.
Great, thank you. And what is our industry's greatest challenges?
Well, we could talk about what Fannie and Freddie, the GSEs, find problematic with real estate appraisals, but let them do that. From a standpoint of what our greatest challenges are, I think it is education. Um, we just assume that somebody coming into real estate appraisal already has some basic skills, some basic writing skills, some basic communication skills, some basic Excel skills, some basic communication skills. And in many cases, that's just not true. And then our education is not set up to take a long time. And, let's face it, real estate appraisal is neither rocket science nor brain surgery. So we should not have those kind of requirements to get in. But in the same vein, real estate appraisal is one of the few industries you can jump into with 100 hours of classroom training. Granted, you can't jump in very deep, but you can jump in. And you can even start to make a living. Although at the beginning, that's tough. I concede that point. But we need to make our educate, in my opinion, and I know that this will fly in the face of what a lot of folks think, and that's okay. Um, we need to make the education, I'm not saying harder, but perhaps more rigorous, perhaps a little bit longer, so that people can understand that what we do is not what we see when we have our own property appraised, not the appraiser's there for 30 minutes and charges whatever they charge, and then 2 days later sends a report. It's a whole lot harder than that. And I don't think our education yet reflects the difficulties, the challenges that we have to overcome in order to come up with a credible value opinion. I was on the phone, I was on a Zoom meeting this morning with an appraiser who was appraising a property in a heavily rural area. And there just weren't a lot of comps. That's just the nature of the beast. And of course, the appraiser's question was, what do I do? Well, there are two answers. You either go further out physically from the property or you go chronologically further back in time. That's all you can do. Unfortunately, through the AMCs, through the GSEs, we get the silliness about 6 months and 1 mile. That's wonderful if you're appraising in Orange County, California. But when you're appraising in Southwest Colorado, that's silly. That just doesn't happen. But that's what that's what we're being told we're supposed to do. And yeah, that's an ideal. We are supposed to do that. But then we also need to understand that that's an ideal. And sometimes we can't. It's just physically impossible. So the AMCs should not expect it. And I think, and this is me getting on my soapbox, I think they're kind of stupid for doing that. The GSEs don't make those requirements. The AMCs do, and I completely disagree with that narrow mindset. Dare I say that biased mindset on the part of AMCs. And I think they do themselves, their clients, and us a disservice by expecting what can't be delivered.
That makes sense. See, it's funny you mentioned that, not rocket science. So the requirements to get in, you actually want to make it more longer, or maybe
Yeah.
you're talking about making it more specific.
Yes, we do really well at the mechanics of it. In other words, we teach hands really well. Teaching hearts and minds, we're not quite so good at. And the mechanics of appraising are just fine. And we got to know those. I mean, without question, we got to understand the mechanics. But then that's the forest floor level. We got to understand it from the 20,000 foot level as well. And by and large, we don't teach that. And that's because there's nothing concrete about that. It's very amorphous, if that's the right word. Whereas saying, okay, here's how you make a GLA adjustment. That's very concrete. But then the thing about a GLA adjustment, or any adjustment for that matter, is okay, that's how you make it. But does the market demand you make it? If the market doesn't demand you make it, why make it? So yeah, you got to know how. But then you've also got to understand when the market says, we're not worried about that much difference in size. There are other fish we have to fry. 80, 100, 125, 150 square feet of GLA, who cares? Now, in a 1,000 square foot house, that may be important. In a 5,000 square foot house, no, probably not. So we got to do the mechanics. We got to train the hands, but we've also got to train the hearts and the minds. And by and large, we are not, in my opinion.
And when you say train the hearts and minds, what do you mean by that?
Well, how do you determine that an adjustment is necessary? Not how do you determine how much it is. How do you determine that one makes sense? I was talking with an appraiser recently. In a $500,000 house, the appraiser was making $1,000 adjustments. I said, okay, why'd you do that? Well, there's a difference. Well, okay, that's true. There is. But show me your data that showed that in a $500,000 house, something contributed $1,000 to value. Well, it isn't much of a difference. You're right. It isn't much of a difference. But show me out of the market where you need to make a $1,000 adjustment in a $500,000 house. Well, I can't. Okay. Now you got to go back and you've got to say to yourself, do I really need to make that adjustment? Or does the market not recognize? And one of the big ones is a fireplace. Now, you're in Tampa, I'm in Palm Beach Gardens. We don't need fireplaces. Okay. Now, you're in Detroit. Okay, you probably need a fireplace. Now, in Detroit, you probably don't need a swimming pool. Down here where we are, yeah, swimming pools are lovely, especially on an afternoon like this one. So we have to understand not only that the market expects an adjustment, but we have to determine if the market expects an adjustment. And this is where our education is deficient. Because the easiest way to determine if the market needs an adjustment is to go through a statistical analysis, which for us is nearly impossible because we don't have enough data. And then we look at what's called the P score. And if obviously there are people listening to this who don't know what a P score is, I'm not going to go into a deep explanation. But if your P score is really small, the market is saying, no, that's not an issue. Don't make an adjustment for it. So um, typically, we don't have that quantity of data to do that kind of analysis. So basically, what you do is you put everything on the grid and you look at the number, and then you take off those teensy, eensy, weensy adjustments, and then you look at the number. And if it didn't change that much, you probably don't need the eensy, weensy, teensy adjustments.
Okay. And where do you think our evaluation, where do we go from here? You mentioned a lot of different topics, a lot of it being education. How do we fix that?
Okay.
Improve that?
Appraisers have the opportunity to say, okay, I can appraise houses. All right, now I'm going to learn how to appraise uh, quadruplexes. In other words, a four-unit housing dwelling. Okay, that's an art, or excuse me, let me rephrase. That is a separate market. Okay, you can take classes on learning how to do those. There are classes you can go to learn how to be an expert witness in a court case or in an IRS case or in an estate case. And those learning curves, I will admit, are long. I concede that point. But once you master them, the money gets better, the stress levels go up, but the money gets better. And when you're making a whole lot more money, you can buy nice vacations to counteract the stress levels. Appraisers can do, for example, appraisers can hire themselves out as contractors to other appraisers. Let's suppose you were licensed in 3 states and you lived relatively close to the borders of 2 of those states. Okay. Could you do work in other states? Sure, by yourself or contracting with other appraisers. That's perfectly legitimate. Appraisers can contract themselves out to take pictures of the property for other appraisers. And the great thing about that is there are no standards. There are no USPAP standards. So as a result, you can go take pictures all day long and you can't violate USPAP because USPAP has no photographic standard. And if you're just taking pictures, you're not functioning as an appraiser. And then for those appraisers who are really adventurous, there is appraisal of other than real estate. There is a market for machinery and equipment. It's called M&E. There is a market for M&E appraising. And yes, it's another learning curve without question. But it's not typically, depending on what you're, if you're appraising atomic reactors, yeah, that's one thing. But if you're appraising antique cars, that's another venue. And I'm not trying to say it's easy, but it's not going to take as long as learning how to appraise real estate. And then the reports are shorter. And unless your client specifically requires it, or unless you promise your client you're going to conform with USPAP, because there is no state appraisal board for antique cars, you don't have to follow USPAP unless you agree to it or the client demands it. So there are plenty of venues, there are plenty of places to go for the appraiser to make money no matter what the market is, in real estate, in M&E, in contract work, etc. All that exists right now. And then one of the things I recommend that appraisers do is they get a designation. Now, I've had appraisers say, well, which one should I get? I don't care. Whatever you want to. There are a number of them out there. They say, will it help me get bank work? And the answer is absolutely not. The AMCs, the lenders do not care about the initials that follow your name if all you're doing is GSE mortgage work. However, if you want to do expert witness work, you want to do estate work, if you want to do a lot of legal work, do you have to have some initials after your name? No. Does it help? Sure does.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. And I'm just, as you were talking about education, my mind started drifting to commercial, that the licensing state general allows you to appraise if anything,
Anything, yeah.
especially, right? So should there be, because there's so much knowledge that it's hard, you could argue it's maybe harder to become a generalist because you're touching different property types, different nuances, multifamily versus industrial versus subdivision. Should the education and the licensing be specific to, okay, now you're competent in retail only?
Hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. As in medical school, for 4 years, you study everything. And then you get out and you go, okay, I want to be an endocrinologist. I want to be a pathologist. I want to be a dermatologist. Okay. And then you specialize in those areas. You're a doctor. Okay. But you're going to specialize in dermatology. Now, are you ever going to do any open heart surgery? You hope as a dermatologist, no, that that problem never presents itself. So, yeah, I would recommend that appraisers get that general certification. And then if they want to specialize in houses, specialize in houses. You can specialize in VA, you can specialize in FHA, you can specialize in just high-end stuff. Fine, go ahead and do that. But because you're a generalist, you can take on anything, no matter where it is or its value. And then when you're a generalist, you've got enough background and knowledge, you can also say, you know what? I don't want that job. No, thank you.
Okay. Any topics we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about?
Well, we could talk about good restaurants in Las Vegas, but I don't think that's main.
That's a different pod.
Yeah, that's a different podcast. That's right. That's right.
Cool. Well, great. Tim, thank you for joining me on the Indispensable Appraisers podcast.
Oh, Jeff, it's been an honor. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you do for real estate appraisers. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye now.